In a quiet village tucked between rolling green hills and whispering trees, lived a boy named Sami. He wasn't the tallest or the strongest boy around, but he had something else, something rare. Sami had a dream that reached far beyond the boundaries of his little village. He wanted to fly. Not just ride in an airplane or a balloon. No, Sami wanted to fly with his own wings, just like the birds he watched every morning as they soared through the golden sky. The way they dipped, glided, and rode the wind filled him with a deep, unexplainable yearning. Each morning before the village woke, Sami would climb the tallest hill near his home and sit in the grass with his sketchbook. He'd study the birds, the curve of their wings, the tilt of their tails, the rhythm of their flapping, and draw. He filled page after page with ideas. Some drawings looked like bird wings made of sticks, others like parachutes or giant paper planes. While other children ran through the fields or played cricket by the stream, Sami scoured the village for scraps. Old bicycle parts, torn bedsheets, broken umbrella frames, anything that could be turned into part of a flying machine, he collected and dragged back home. The neighbors often laughed when they saw him walking by with arms full of junk. "There goes the little bird boy," they'd chuckle. "Maybe one day he'll fly over the moon." Even the village kids, once his playmates, started keeping their distance. They didn't understand why Sami would rather spend hours with screws and bolts instead of playing tag or listening to stories. "Why don't you do something fun for once?" one boy asked. Sami just smiled. "This is fun to me." His parents were kind-hearted and hard-working people. His father was a farmer, his mother ran a small fruit stand in the village market. They loved Sami dearly, but his dream puzzled them. Flying. With those tiny arms, his father once said, trying not to sound discouraging. "You're a good boy, Sami. But maybe stick to something more possible." But Sami believed. Deep down, he knew that flying wasn't just something for birds or machines. He believed that humans, too, could fly if only they tried hard enough, and didn't give up. In a small clearing behind his house, Sami built a workshop out of bamboo poles and old tarps. He worked after school and sometimes late into the night, his hands blackened with grease and his clothes stained with glue. His workshop smelled of rust, oil, and imagination. His first creation was a pair of cardboard wings tied to his arms with cloth strips. He climbed up the henhouse, flapped hard, and jumped. He didn't fly. He fell, straight into a bush of wild thorns. But he laughed, pulled himself out, and went back to the drawing board. He tried again. And again. Bamboo wings, paper parachutes, gliders made from wooden frames and plastic sheets, each attempt failed in a new and exciting way. Yet, with every fall, Sami stood up smiling. Sami's dream had grown bigger, but so had the weight of his failures. Every week brought a new invention and a new crash. Sometimes he leaped off the hill with makeshift wings and landed in the mud. Other times, his glider would wobble in the air for a glorious 2 seconds before folding like a paper fan. Scratches, bruises, and ripped clothes became part of his daily life. But none of it could shake him. What did begin to wear him down, however, was the laughter. The village had always been small and tightly knit. Word spread fast. The blacksmith told the baker, who told the carpenter, who told everyone at the tea stall, that boy tried to fly again. Fell like a stone. Children pointed at him on the street. "Hey Sami, flying today, or crashing," they'd giggle. One boy even tied chicken feathers to a stick and waved it at him. "Here, this might help you fly next time." Sami tried to ignore them. But the teasing dug deep. It wasn't just jokes anymore, it was doubt, seeping in like rain through the cracks. One afternoon, after another failed flight, Sami limped back home, his glider splintered across the hillside. His knees were scraped, his face streaked with dirt, and worst of all, his spirit felt heavy. His father was sitting outside their small home, mending a farming tool. He looked up and saw his son dragging a broken frame behind him. "Sami," his father said gently, setting the tool aside. "Come sit with me." They sat in silence for a moment, the sun dipping low behind the hills. "You've got a strong heart," his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Stronger than most. But maybe," he paused. "Maybe it's time to let this dream go, just for a while. You've tried so hard, son. Maybe it's not meant to be." Sami didn't speak. He stared at the ground, fingers twisting the torn strap of his glider. The words were kindly spoken, but they cut deeper than any fall. That night, Sami didn't touch his tools. He sat alone in his room, staring at his drawings on the wall, sketches of wings, gliders, soaring birds. For the first time, he wondered, what if they were right? What if flying really is just a silly dream? Outside, a storm began to roll in. Wind howled through the trees, and rain tapped at his window. But inside, another storm brewed, one of doubt, confusion, and pain. The next morning, he didn't go to the hill. The villagers noticed. Finally gave up, I guess, someone said. About time, said another. But what they didn't know was that Sami wasn't giving up. He was thinking, reflecting, and listening to a voice deep inside that refused to be silenced. Late that night, while the village slept and the rain still whispered outside, Sami lit a small oil lamp. He unrolled a fresh sheet of paper. His hands shook slightly, but his eyes burned with a quiet fire. He began to draw. This time, he didn't rush. He didn't build out of excitement or hope alone. He built with understanding. With memory. For days, the skies stayed gray, and the rain continued to fall, as if the clouds themselves were weeping for all the dreams crushed by doubt. But inside Sami's small room, something new was taking shape. No longer rushing to build or jumping off hills with half-finished wings, Sami took his time. Every line he drew on paper now came from experience, wings that snapped in the wind, gliders that tilted too far, frames that crumbled under his weight. He studied each failure like a map showing where he had gone wrong. He also began to read. The village didn't have a library, but there was an old man who once traveled far as a teacher. People called him Baba Rafi. He had a dusty collection of worn-out books, some in languages Sami barely understood, but he borrowed them anyway. Still chasing the sky? Baba Rafi asked with a smile as he handed him an old book titled The Art of Flight. Sami nodded. But this time, I'm learning how to chase it right. Day after day, between school and chores, Sami read about air resistance, lift, drag, and wind currents. He filled notebooks with calculations. He began to understand why his gliders fell and what real wings needed to do. He also started gathering materials, not scrap, but things that mattered. He traded his old toys and did small chores around the village to earn spare parts. A traveling carpenter gave him lightweight wooden rods. A tailor handed him strong canvas cloth. Even the blacksmith, who once mocked him, silently gave him small bolts and screws. People were noticing something different. Sami wasn't running around with wild ideas anymore. He was focused. Steady. Purposeful. In a clearing near the back of the village, beneath a large banyan tree, Sami began to build. It wasn't easy. Rain soaked the ground, and winds tore down his tent more than once. He burned his hand on a hot metal rod and cut his fingers while carving a piece of wood. But not once did he say, "I can't." Every bruise reminded him that the sky wouldn't come easy, but it would come. Weeks passed. Then one morning, the sun returned. After days of storm, the sky opened blue and clear, like a silent encouragement from above. That was the day Sami placed the final bolt into his new glider. It was unlike anything he had built before. The frame was light but strong. The wings stretched wide like those of a hawk. The fabric was smooth and firm. It had a simple control bar and a harness to hold him in place. Sami stood back and looked at it. For the first time, he didn't wonder if it would fly. He knew. But something had changed even more than the machine, he had changed. He was no longer just a dreamer chasing the sky. He was a builder, a learner, and someone who had grown from every fall. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills in gold, Sami's father approached the clearing. He looked at the glider. Then at his son. "You really did all this?" he asked quietly. Sami nodded. The morning of the flight arrived like a quiet promise. The sun crept slowly over the hilltops, casting long golden beams across the village rooftops and the dew-covered grass. A cool wind whispered through the trees, just enough to ruffle the fabric of Sami's glider, which stood ready at the top of the tallest hill. Word had spread. The villagers, once mockers and doubters, began to climb the slope, drawn by a mix of curiosity and awe. Children who had once teased him now watched with wide, silent eyes. Elders came too, leaning on walking sticks, whispering tales of the boy who never gave up. Sami stood next to his glider, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, his hair tied back with a strip of cloth to keep it out of his face. He didn't look like a pilot. He looked like himself, calm, focused, and quietly burning with belief. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He checked the wings once more, fastened the straps, tightened the bolts. Every part of the glider had a story, every piece had been earned with effort, pain, or a lesson. His father stepped forward from the crowd. "You don't have to prove anything," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You've already flown higher than any of us ever dared." Sami looked at him, smiled, and nodded. "I know," he replied. "But this isn't about proving. This is about becoming." He turned, gripped the handles, and took a few steps back. The hill ahead sloped downward, steep and clear, like a runway sent from the heavens. The wind picked up, gentle, steady, and strong. Perfect. He took a deep breath. And ran. The crowd held its breath. A jolt, a tug, and suddenly, he wasn't running anymore. He was flying. The glider rose above the ground, tilting into the wind with grace. The air pressed against the wings, lifting him higher, smoother, steadier. Below him, the crowd erupted in gasps and cheers. Tiny voices shouted his name. "Sami! Sami!" He glided past treetops, past rooftops, soaring over the village that once laughed at him. The world looked different from above, calmer, smaller, more beautiful. Fields stretched like patchwork quilts, rivers sparkled like threads of silver, and the sky felt close enough to touch. He was part of it. He banked gently, guiding the glider in a slow arc. Birds flew beside him, as if greeting a new member of their world. One dipped its wing, and Sami dipped his in return. Time seemed to stretch. But even dreams must return to earth. Sami spotted a flat field below and guided his glider downward. His body moved with the wind, like a leaf falling with grace instead of fear. The glider dipped, steadied, and touched the grass with a soft skid. Dust flew. The frame bounced once, and stopped. Silence. Then, cheers. The villagers came running, shouting and clapping. Children leapt with joy. The elders raised their hands in respect. Even those who had once mocked him had tears in their eyes. Sami stood in the middle of the cheering crowd, his hair windswept, his face flushed with joy, and the dust of landing still clinging to his clothes. Around him, the villagers buzzed like bees, shouting, laughing, clapping, but inside him, there was stillness. He had done it. The boy who once collected scraps and built dreams in the dirt had touched the sky. Children tugged at his sleeves, asking how it felt. "Like floating on a wish," he said with a grin. Elders who once shook their heads in disapproval now nodded slowly in respect. "You were right to believe," one of them said. "And we were wrong to laugh." Sami's father stood beside the glider, running his fingers gently over its frame, marveling at its strength and simplicity. "I thought it was madness," he admitted, turning to his son. "But I see now, it was vision." Baba Rafi, the old teacher who had lent him books, arrived last. He looked up at the sky, then down at the boy before him. "Once in a lifetime," he said, "a dreamer changes the shape of a village." Sami bowed his head. "I only wanted to fly." "And you taught us how," Baba Rafi replied. That evening, the village gathered in the open clearing beneath the stars. A fire was lit, and food was shared. For the first time, Sami wasn't sitting off to the side, tinkering with bolts or sketching wings in a notebook. He was at the center of it all. Not as a curiosity, not as the bird boy, but as someone who had shown them what belief could do. Children begged him to tell the story of his flight again. He stood before them and raised his hand. "I failed more times than I can count," he began. "I got hurt. I got laughed at. I nearly gave up." The crowd went silent. "But every time I fell, I learned something new. And every time I stood back up, I got stronger." You don't need wings to fly, you need courage. You need patience. And above all, you need to never give up. The words settled over the gathering like a soft wind, touching hearts young and old. From that day on, the village changed. No longer did they scoff at dreams or small ideas. Children started building things. Some made kites. Others built model boats or painted murals. The village slowly transformed from a place of routine into a place of wonder. Sami didn't stop with one flight. He improved his design, taught other kids what he had learned, and even helped build a proper workshop with help from his father and the villagers. His story spread to nearby towns. People came to see the boy who built wings, and some came to learn. Years later, when he grew older, Sami would fly again, higher, farther. But no moment ever felt quite like the first. That feeling, of running into the wind, of lifting off the ground, of becoming more than just a dreamer, remained the greatest flight of his life. And through it all, he never forgot the lesson that had carried him to the sky. The only time you truly fail is when you stop trying.